Lieutenant Daisy Mitchell earned the nickname, Wildflower, because at 25 years old, standing barely 5'4" with blonde hair kept in regulation braids and green eyes that sparkled with mischief, she looked like she belonged in a college sorority rather than in the cockpit of an AH-64 Apache attack helicopter. For 18 months she had been stationed at Forward Operating Base Blackhawk, a remote military installation in a mountainous region where tensions ran high and airspace violations happened daily. The base served as a critical strategic position, monitoring enemy movements and providing air support for ground operations across disputed territory that had seen conflict for decades. Daisy was the youngest pilot at the base, the only female pilot in her squadron, and according to most of her fellow aviators, the person least likely to survive actual combat. What they didn't know was that Daisy Mitchell had been flying since she was 12 years old, had logged more simulator hours than pilots twice her age, and possessed an intuitive understanding of aerial combat that bordered on supernatural. Her father, Colonel Robert Mitchell, had been a helicopter pilot in 3 different conflicts before retiring to become a civilian flight instructor. Every weekend of Daisy's childhood had been spent at small airfields learning to read weather patterns, understand engine mechanics, and develop the kind of reflexes that separated good pilots from dead pilots. Flying isn't about the machine, Daisy, her father would tell her during those long afternoons in cockpits of various aircraft. It's about becoming the machine. When you stop thinking about what the helicopter can do and start feeling what it needs to do, that's when you become dangerous. Daisy had learned more than just flying from her father. She had learned tactical thinking, situational awareness, and the kind of aggressive mindset that treated every flight as a potential combat mission. While other kids were playing video games, Daisy was studying aerial combat maneuvers, weapon systems, and the psychology of air-to-air warfare. Her military training had been exemplary, with top marks in flight school, perfect scores on weapons qualifications, and instructor recommendations that used words like exceptional, natural, and destined for greatness. But none of that mattered to the veteran pilots who saw a young woman who looked like she should be teaching kindergarten, not flying attack helicopters. The morning of September 23 started like every other morning at FOB Blackhawk. Daisy was in the hangar at 0530 performing pre-flight inspections on her Apache, tail number 77 Alpha. The aircraft was her pride and joy, a fully loaded AH-64D longbow Apache equipped with Hellfire missiles, a 30mm chain gun, and the most advanced targeting systems the military had ever deployed. She knew every bolt, wire, and component in that machine. She had personally overseen every maintenance procedure, supervised every weapons load, and spent countless hours fine-tuning the avionics to respond to her specific flying style. Apache 77 Alpha wasn't just her assigned aircraft, it was an extension of her own nervous system. The mission briefing at 0600 was routine: reconnaissance patrol along the eastern border, intelligence gathering on enemy troop movements, and close air support for any ground units that might need assistance. Expected flight time was 4 hours with minimal enemy contact anticipated. Mitchell, called Major Thompson, the squadron commander, as pilots filed out of the briefing room, "I want you to stay close to home today. Don't go looking for trouble." "Yes, sir," Daisy replied with the kind of respectful tone that managed to sound both compliant and completely non-committal. As she walked toward her Apache, Sergeant Williams, the chief mechanic, fell into step beside her. "You know, Lieutenant, the Major's just looking out for you. Some of these enemy pilots have been flying combat missions since before you were born." "I appreciate the concern, Sergeant," Daisy said, pulling on her flight helmet, "but I've been preparing for this my whole life." Williams helped her through the final pre-flight checks, his experienced hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had kept aircraft flying in combat zones for over 15 years. "Just remember, ma'am, in aerial combat there's no such thing as a fair fight. If you find yourself in trouble, don't try to be a hero. Call for backup and get out of there." "Copy that, Sergeant," Daisy said, settling into the pilot seat and beginning her engine start sequence. "But what if backup is 20 minutes away and trouble is right now?" Williams grinned despite himself. "Then I guess we find out if all that simulator time was worth anything." At 0645 hours, Apache 77 Alpha lifted off from FOB Blackhawk, its twin General Electric turboshaft engines producing the distinctive sound that had become synonymous with American air power around the world. Daisy felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with every takeoff, the moment when tons of machinery and weapons became an extension of her own will. The patrol route took her along the disputed border over terrain that changed from dense forest to rocky mountains to open valleys where enemy forces might be massing for operations against American positions. Through her targeting system she could see everything: vehicle movements, personnel concentrations, communication equipment, and the heat signatures that indicated recent activity. For the first 2 hours everything was routine. She logged several enemy supply convoys, photographed new construction that might indicate military installations, and provided overwatch for a friendly ground patrol that was investigating reports of enemy infiltration. At 0847 hours her threat warning system began beeping. Apache 77, this is Blackhawk control, crackled her radio. We're showing multiple airborne contacts approaching your position from the northeast. Count 7 fast movers closing at high speed. Daisy immediately changed course, descending toward a mountain valley that would provide some terrain masking while she assessed the threat. Through her targeting pod she could see them: 7 MiG-29 Fulcrum fighters flying in formation, clearly heading directly toward her position. Blackhawk control, Apache 77, she transmitted, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. I have visual on 7 enemy fighters. They appear to be actively tracking my position. Requesting immediate backup. Apache 77, backup is en route, but ETA is 20 minutes. Recommend you withdraw to friendly airspace immediately. 20 minutes in aerial combat might as well be 20 hours. Daisy looked at her tactical display, calculating distances, speeds, and intercept courses. The enemy fighters were flying at approximately Mach 1.2, which meant they would be within weapons range in less than 3 minutes. Her Apache, loaded with weapons and flying at maximum speed, could manage maybe 190 miles per hour. Simple mathematics told her she couldn't outrun them and she couldn't reach friendly airspace before they caught her. Blackhawk control, Apache 77, she transmitted. Withdrawal is not possible. Enemy fighters will intercept before I can reach friendly lines. I'm going defensive. A long pause, then, Apache 77, are you sure? You're outnumbered 7 to 1 and they have significant speed and altitude advantage. Daisy looked at her weapons display: 8 Hellfire missiles, 1,200 rounds of 30mm ammunition, and the most sophisticated targeting system ever mounted on a helicopter. She also had something the enemy pilots didn't have: 18 years of preparation for exactly this moment. Blackhawk control, I'm sure, she replied. Apache 77 is going weapons hot. The 7 MiG-29s approached in a classic attack formation, 2 flights of 3 aircraft each with the 7th fighter hanging back as a command element. They were flying with the confidence of pilots who believed they were engaging a helpless transport helicopter that had wandered into the wrong airspace. Through intercepted radio communications, Daisy could hear their chatter: target acquired, 1 Apache helicopter, no escort. This should be over quickly. They had made their first tactical error by underestimating their opponent. Daisy descended to treetop level, using the mountainous terrain to break radar lock and complicate their attack geometry. An Apache helicopter flying nap of the Earth was incredibly difficult to track, even for advanced fighter aircraft. She was essentially invisible until the moment she chose to reveal herself. The lead MiG-29 dove toward her last known position, the pilot confident that he was about to score an easy kill against a defenseless helicopter. He never saw the Hellfire missile that rose from the trees like guided lightning, tracking his heat signature with lethal precision. The first enemy fighter exploded at 0847 hours and 23 seconds. What the hell was that? Shouted one of the other pilots over the radio. That helicopter just shot down Victor. Daisy was already moving, her Apache skimming through valleys and around mountain peaks, using terrain masking to avoid the remaining 6 fighters while she lined up her next shot. The enemy pilots were now spread out looking for her, but they were looking in the wrong places. She popped up from behind a ridgeline, acquired the 2nd MiG-29 with her targeting system, and fired another Hellfire missile before disappearing back into the terrain. The second fighter went down at 0847 hours and 51 seconds. Where is she? The enemy flight leader was shouting. I can't get a lock on her. She's using the mountains, replied another pilot. We need to coordinate our attacks. But coordination requires communication, and communication requires predictable flight patterns. Daisy had been monitoring their radio frequency since the engagement began, listening to their tactical discussions and anticipating their movements. When the 3rd and 4th MiG-29s attempted to bracket her position with a coordinated attack, she was already 3 kilometers away, rising from a different valley with 2 more Hellfire missiles ready to fire. Both missiles found their targets within seconds of each other. 2 more enemy fighters disappeared in balls of flame and debris. 4 down, 3 to go. The remaining enemy pilots were no longer confident. Their radio chatter had changed from casual professionalism to desperate tactical coordination. They were facing something they had never encountered before, a helicopter pilot who fought like a fighter pilot but with the tactical advantages of a ground-hugging missile platform. "This is impossible," one of them transmitted. "A helicopter can't fight like this." "It's not the helicopter," replied the flight leader grimly. "It's the pilot." The 5th MiG-29 tried a high-speed diving attack, hoping to use superior velocity to overwhelm Daisy's defenses. Instead he flew directly into a trap she had been preparing for the past 2 minutes. As he dove toward her position, she fired her 30mm chain gun in a continuous burst that filled the air with explosive rounds. At 400 rounds per minute, the M230 chain gun could destroy most aircraft with a single burst. The diving MiG-29 flew directly into a wall of high explosive ammunition and disintegrated instantly. 5 down, 2 to go. The 6th fighter attempted to engage her from maximum range, firing air-to-air missiles from several kilometers away. But missiles designed to target high-speed aircraft had trouble tracking a helicopter that could stop, hover, and change direction in ways that violated every assumption built into their guidance systems. Daisy simply dropped behind a mountain peak, let the enemy missiles harmlessly impact the terrain, then emerged from a completely different location with her final 2 Hellfire missiles. The 6th MiG-29 exploded at 0849 hours and 12 seconds. The 7th and final enemy pilot found himself alone, his entire squadron eliminated, facing a helicopter pilot who had just accomplished something that military historians would study for decades to come. Unknown Apache pilot, he transmitted on the emergency frequency, his voice shaking with disbelief. "This is Colonel Novak, 47th Fighter Regiment. I surrender." Daisy looked at her weapons display. She still had 1 Hellfire missile and over 800 rounds of 30mm ammunition. More importantly, she had the tactical advantage and the enemy pilot was clearly demoralized. But surrender was surrender. "Colonel Novak," she replied calmly, "this is Lieutenant Daisy Mitchell, United States Army. You will proceed immediately to FOB Blackhawk and land according to my instructions. Any deviation from the prescribed flight path will be considered hostile action." "Understood, Lieutenant Mitchell. I will comply." As the final MiG-29 followed her Apache back toward friendly airspace, Daisy keyed her radio to report to base control. "Blackhawk control, Apache 77. Go ahead, 77. 7 enemy fighters engaged. 6 enemy aircraft destroyed. 1 enemy pilot captured. Apache 77 is returning to base with prisoner in custody. No damage to friendly aircraft. No friendly casualties." A long silence followed, broken only by the sound of rotors and jet engines crossing the morning sky. "Apache 77, say again. Did you say 6 enemy aircraft destroyed?" "That's affirmative, Blackhawk control. 6 confirmed kills, 1 surrender, engaging 7 MiG-29s simultaneously. Total engagement time 12 minutes and 41 seconds. Another long pause. "Outstanding work, Apache 77. Outstanding work." When Daisy landed at FOB Blackhawk 47 minutes later, followed by a surrendering MiG-29 pilot who would provide valuable intelligence for months to come, the entire base was waiting for her. Major Thompson was the first to reach her aircraft as she shut down the engines. "Mitchell," he said, his voice filled with something between amazement and disbelief, "I've been flying combat missions for 22 years and I've never seen anything like what you just did." "Thank you, sir," Daisy replied, removing her helmet and shaking out her blonde braids. "I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Thompson laughed. "Lieutenant, your job description doesn't include single-handedly destroying entire enemy fighter squadrons. What you did today is going to change how we think about helicopter warfare." Sergeant Williams was waiting by the Apache, running his hands over the aircraft looking for battle damage. "Lieutenant, how the hell did you do that? 7 fighters and you don't have so much as a scratch on this bird." "Terrain masking, superior weapon systems, and 20 years of preparation," Daisy said simply. "Also, they underestimated me because I look like I should be arranging flowers instead of firing missiles." Williams grinned. "Well, I guess we know now why your call sign is Wildflower. Some flowers have thorns." The after-action report filed by Major Thompson would eventually reach the Pentagon where it would be classified at the highest levels and studied by military strategists around the world. The engagement would be credited as the first time in modern warfare that a single helicopter had successfully engaged and defeated multiple fighter aircraft in air-to-air combat. But the official reports couldn't capture what had really happened in those 12 minutes and 41 seconds over the disputed territory. They couldn't describe the split-second timing, the perfect tactical awareness, or the absolute ice-cold professionalism that had allowed Daisy Mitchell to turn what should have been certain death into complete victory. Within hours of her return to base, encrypted communications were flying between military commands around the globe. The implications of what Daisy had accomplished extended far beyond a single extraordinary engagement. She had fundamentally challenged decades of military doctrine about helicopter capabilities and limitations. General Amanda Stevens, commanding officer of the 7th Air Wing, arrived at FOB Blackhawk 36 hours after the engagement. Her visit was unannounced, classified, and focused entirely on understanding how one pilot had achieved something that military theorists had considered impossible. "Captain Mitchell," General Stevens said during their private debriefing, "I've reviewed every detail of your engagement. What you accomplished violates everything we thought we knew about rotary wing aircraft in air-to-air combat." "Ma'am, I respectfully disagree," Daisy replied. "What I accomplished proved that our understanding of helicopter capabilities has been artificially limited by assumptions rather than actual testing." Stevens studied the young pilot carefully. "Explain. We've always assumed that helicopters can't engage fighter aircraft because fighters are faster and more maneuverable. But that assumption ignores terrain masking, weapons technology, and tactical surprise. A helicopter that uses ground cover effectively becomes invisible to fighter radar until the moment it chooses to attack, and once you attack, you disappear again before the enemy can respond. Fighters are designed to engage targets in open airspace at high speeds. They're not optimized for hunting something that can hover behind a mountain, pop up long enough to fire a missile, then vanish back into terrain cover." General Stevens nodded slowly. "You turned their advantages into disadvantages." "Yes, ma'am. Their speed meant they couldn't slow down to properly search terrain features. Their altitude advantage meant they couldn't track low-flying targets effectively. Their numbers meant they had to coordinate, which required predictable communication patterns that I could monitor and exploit." The conversation continued for 2 hours, with Daisy providing detailed tactical analysis of every decision she had made during the engagement. Her explanations revealed a level of strategic thinking that impressed even seasoned military commanders. The most significant revelation came when General Stevens asked about her psychological state during the combat. "Were you afraid, Captain?" Daisy considered the question carefully. "No, ma'am, I was focused. Fear would have slowed down my decision-making process, and in aerial combat hesitation equals death. I had trained for this scenario my entire life. When it finally happened, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. And when you realized you were facing 7 enemy fighters simultaneously, I saw 7 separate problems that needed individual solutions. The fact that they were all happening at once just meant I needed to solve them quickly and efficiently." General Stevens recognized something in Daisy's response that marked the difference between good pilots and legendary ones: the ability to remain completely calm under impossible pressure and treat overwhelming odds as routine tactical challenges. 3 days later, Daisy received orders transferring her to a classified unit that specialized in developing new helicopter warfare tactics. The assignment came with a promotion to captain and access to experimental aircraft that officially didn't exist. Her new commanding officer was Colonel Diana Crawford, a woman who had read every classified report about the engagement and understood exactly what kind of pilot had been delivered to her unit. "Captain Mitchell," Crawford said during their first meeting, "what you accomplished was theoretically impossible according to every military manual ever written. Helicopters don't engage fighter aircraft in air-to-air combat and win." "With respect, ma'am," Daisy replied, "I think we need to rewrite those manuals." "That's exactly what we're going to do," Crawford smiled. "Your mission is to prove that what happened wasn't a fluke. We're going to develop tactics that allow attack helicopters to operate in contested airspace against superior numbers of enemy fighters." "Sounds like my kind of assignment, ma'am." "There's one more thing," Crawford added. "From now on your call sign isn't Wildflower anymore. As of today you're Ghost 7, after the 7 kills you scored in a single engagement." The new assignment took Daisy to a classified facility known only as Site Delta, where the military's most experimental aviation programs were developed and tested. Her fellow pilots were all volunteers who had been selected for exceptional skill, creativity, and willingness to push the boundaries of what aircraft could accomplish. Her first assignment was to develop training programs that would teach other helicopter pilots the tactics she had used during her engagement with the 7 MiG-29s. This proved more challenging than expected because what Daisy had done instinctively needed to be broken down into teachable components. "The problem," she explained to Colonel Crawford during a planning session, "is that terrain masking isn't just about hiding behind mountains. It's about reading the landscape like a three-dimensional chessboard, anticipating where enemies will look for you, and positioning yourself where they don't expect you to be. Can that be taught? The techniques can be taught, Daisy said. The intuition has to be developed through practice, lots of practice. Over the following months Daisy worked with flight instructors to develop a curriculum that combined traditional helicopter tactics with fighter pilot mindset training. Students learned to think of their aircraft not as support vehicles but as primary combat platforms capable of engaging any aerial threat. The psychological component was as important as the technical training. Most helicopter pilots had been conditioned to avoid fighter aircraft, to call for backup when threatened, to prioritize survival over engagement. Daisy's program taught them to think of fighter aircraft as targets rather than threats. When you see 7 enemy fighters approaching, she would tell her students, you shouldn't be thinking about how to escape. You should be thinking about how to position yourself for 7 clean shots. The training was intensive, dangerous, and unlike anything the military had ever attempted. Students learned to fly nap of the earth routes at high speed, to use terrain features as tactical advantages, and to employ weapon systems in ways that manufacturers had never intended. More importantly, they learned to think like Daisy Mitchell, to see overwhelming odds as tactical opportunities, to treat impossible situations as routine problems, and to understand that the most dangerous pilot in any engagement is the one who refuses to accept that some fights can't be won. 6 months after beginning the program, Daisy was leading a squadron of specially trained Apache pilots who could engage fighter aircraft with confidence and effectiveness that revolutionized helicopter warfare. Her techniques were being taught at flight schools around the world, and her engagement over the disputed territory had become required study for all military aviators. But the most significant validation of her approach came during a classified exercise where her squadron of 4 Apache helicopters was tasked with defending a ground position against 12 enemy fighter aircraft in a simulated attack. Using the tactics Daisy had developed, her pilots eliminated all 12 attacking fighters without losing a single helicopter. The exercise results were so decisive that they were initially classified as unrealistic until independent observers confirmed that the techniques worked exactly as demonstrated. The enemy pilot she had captured, Colonel Novak, had provided valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and tactics during his extensive debriefing. His insights into enemy thinking and operational procedures had helped refine the training program and identify additional tactical opportunities. During his final interview before repatriation, Novak had made one comment that perfectly captured what had happened that day. I thought I was engaging a helicopter pilot, he said, but I was actually fighting someone who thought like a fighter pilot, flew like a helicopter pilot, and fought like neither. She was something completely new. That assessment had become the unofficial motto of Site Delta's helicopter warfare program, something completely new. The success of her program had attracted attention from international allies who wanted to understand and replicate her methods. Daisy found herself training pilots from 12 different countries, sharing techniques that had transformed helicopter warfare doctrine across multiple military forces. Her influence extended beyond tactical innovation. Young female pilots around the world now had a role model who proved that physical appearance had no correlation with combat effectiveness. Military recruitment campaigns began featuring stories of pilots who succeeded through skill and determination rather than conforming to traditional expectations. The ripple effects of her achievement continued expanding. Defense contractors redesigned helicopter weapon systems based on her tactical requirements. Flight schools modified their curricula to include terrain masking techniques. Military strategists rewrote engagement protocols to account for helicopter air-to-air capabilities that had previously been considered impossible. A year after the engagement, Captain Daisy Mitchell received her second promotion and assignment to lead the military's first experimental helicopter air superiority squadron. Her unit's mission was to provide air-to-air combat capability in situations where traditional fighter aircraft couldn't operate effectively. The 7 MiG-29s that had surrounded Apache 77 Alpha on that September morning had been expecting to encounter a routine American patrol, eliminate a single helicopter, and return to base with an easy victory. Instead they had encountered Daisy Mitchell, a pilot who had been preparing for aerial combat since she was 12 years old, who understood that the best defense was a perfect defense, and who proved that in skilled hands any aircraft could be a weapon. But more than changing military tactics or rewriting training manuals, Daisy had changed something more fundamental. She had shattered assumptions about what was possible when training, determination, and opportunity came together at exactly the right moment. The young woman who had been called Wildflower because she looked too delicate for combat had become Ghost 7 because she had made 7 enemy fighters disappear in less than 13 minutes. And in a mountainous region where tensions still ran high and airspace violations still happened daily, enemy pilots now told stories about the American helicopter that fought like nothing they had ever encountered, flown by a pilot whose name had become synonymous with the impossible. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the sky is the one everyone thinks belongs on the ground. Sometimes the wildflower has the sharpest thorns. Sometimes appearances aren't just deceiving, they're deadly. And sometimes when 7 fighters surround one helicopter, it's the fighters who should be worried. The impossible became inevitable the moment Daisy Mitchell decided that being outnumbered was just another tactical challenge, that being underestimated was a strategic advantage, and that looking like you belong in a flower shop while flying an Apache helicopter was the perfect combination for making military history. Ghost 7 was born that day, but Wildflower had been preparing for it her entire life.